President Biden facing a daunting list of challenges.
We are in the window when an invasion could begin at any time, should Vladimir Putin decide to order it.
The national security advisor delivering that warning after Biden convened his team in the Situation Room last night amid renewed warnings that Russia could invade Ukraine at any moment.
We want to be crystal clear on this point. Any American in Ukraine should leave as soon as possible, and in any event in the next 24 to 48 hours. If a Russian attack on Ukraine proceeds, it is likely to begin with aerial bombing and missile attacks that could obviously kill civilians without regard to their nationality.
But as Biden waits to see what move Putin makes, he's also juggling a slew of domestic challenges at home.
Let's look at the reasons for the inflation.
The president promising all hands on deck after consumer prices skyrocketed last year, despite his predictions that inflation was only temporary, and bristling when questioned about it by NBC's Lester Holt.
A lot of Americans are wondering what your definition of temporary is.
Well, you're being a wise guy with me a little bit.
As higher prices shrink their wallets, voters have been taking notice. A new CNN poll shows that Biden's handling of the economy has dipped 8 points to 37% since early December, and his handling of COVID-19 dropped 9 points to 45%.
I'm going to do everything in my power to deal with the big points that are impacting most people in their homes.
Biden's poll numbers started to slide last fall at the same time as the chaotic exit from Afghanistan, which Biden has continued to defend.
Look, there was no good time to get out. But if we had not gotten out, they acknowledged that we would have had to put a hell of a lot more troops back in.
He's also disputing the findings of a new Army investigative report, details of which were first published in the Washington Post, that said administration officials ignored warning signs or were in denial about what was happening on the ground in Afghanistan.
No, that's not what I was told.
The president going as far as to say he rejects the findings based on sworn testimony from several senior U.S. commanders.
Are you rejecting the conclusions or the accounts that are in this Army report?
Yes, I am.
So they're not true?
I'm rejecting them.
What the president was rejecting is the notion that there weren't a range of preparations done in advance over the course of last spring and last summer.
All right, Caitlin, stay there. I want to bring in CNN's Abby Phillip, and let's chat about all this. Abby, 59% of voters say the economy will be extremely important to their congressional vote this year. Inflation is at a 40-year high. I want to once again show our audience what the president said when he was asked about inflation and what he had said about inflation earlier by NBC's Lester Holt.
You said inflation was going to be temporary. I think a lot of Americans are wondering what your definition of temporary is.
Well, you're being a wise guy with me a little bit, and I understand that's your job.
When can Americans expect some relief from this soaring inflation?
According to Nobel laureates, 14 of them that contacted me and a number of corporate leaders, it's ought to be able to start to taper off as we go through this year. In the meantime, I'm going to do everything in my power to deal with the big points that are impacting most people in their homes.
What do you make of that? Because I have to say, his first response is Lester Holt's being a wise guy. I've never heard Lester Holt described as a wise guy. That was a pretty straight newsman question, right? Like you said, it was going to be temporary. It's not temporary. You know, what's your definition of temporary? And he bristled as if it was about his feelings.
And then provided a very specific number of Nobel laureates who have apparently called him on this issue. Look, I mean, a lot of presidents actually get in that headspace where President Biden is right now. They're running the country. They're hearing from a lot of smart people telling them that the numbers look good. But the problem with that answer is that it doesn't actually capture the answer that is important to people listening to it, which is, do you understand what I am experiencing? And he gets to it later in the question where he says, okay, we're focusing on the pocketbook issues that matter, but that should have been the first part of the answer, not the second part. No one wants to be, slapped in the face with some graphs and charts. I mean, at the end of the day, the American people want to know, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
And they want to hear from the president, I understand what you're going through.
Yeah. And Caitlin, even in that answer, the president continues to say that inflation is going to taper off later this year. If that doesn't turn out to be the case, won't that put the president and the Democratic Party in even more trouble with voters?
Well, it will almost certainly put them in trouble with voters if inflation is still very high when it comes close to the midterms. The White House is well aware of that. And I think it is notable that you're seeing President Biden, when he makes a prediction like that one, saying that inflation would likely taper off by the end of this year, he is attributing that to forecasters. He is not saying that as his own prediction. And of course, in the past, he had been repeatedly saying transitory, transitory, transitory to describe inflation. So were his aides. And you even heard the Federal Reserve Chairman say that's probably not a good word to describe this, given it's clearly not temporary and has not been for the last several months. But I think that's a factor into all of this. And when you've seen the CNN polling that shows he's dropped several points, 7 to 9 points on the economy since early December, I think a lot of that has to do with expectations. Because yes, people can understand that last year was unprecedented. We had 2 variants that came and really changed expectations for how they were going to be exiting COVID-19. But the White House repeatedly describing it as something that it ended up not being, and not only describing it as temporary, but criticizing people like Larry Summers, who were saying it's not going to be temporary, I think speaks to the expectations game and making sure people are aware of realistically what's going to happen and aware that, you know, it may not taper off and that may not go according to those forecasts.
Yeah, the expectations game is not a game they have excelled at playing, the Biden White House, whether it's COVID, whether it's inflation, whether it's Afghanistan. And Abby, let's turn to that because another answer that jumped out at me from Lester Holt's interview was the president was asked about a recently uncovered U.S. Army report, first obtained by the Washington Post, that revealed that there were plenty of military leaders frustrated with the White House and the State Department officials over how the evacuation in Afghanistan, the preparation for it, went down. Let's take a look.
They've interviewed many military officials and officers who said the administration ignored the handwriting on the wall. Another described trying to get folks in the embassy ready to evacuate, encountering people who were essentially in denial of the situation. Does any of that ring true to you?
No. No. That's not what I was told.
Are you rejecting the conclusions or the accounts that are in this Army report?
Yes, I am.
So they're not true?
I'm rejecting them.
So 2 things. One, he says, that's not what I was told. Okay, well, you're the president. You're supposed to be getting all this information. That's on you. There's obviously a long history of bad information weeding its way out before it goes up to the primary. Second, he says, Lester Holt asked him, you're rejecting the conclusions or the accounts? He says, yes, I am. So you're rejecting what these, like, grunts are saying to the U.S. Army? What these, like, rank and file soldiers and Marines are saying?
Well, look, I mean, President Biden has, from the beginning, his position has been, it really doesn't matter what you all say are the consequences of doing this. I want to get out of Afghanistan at all costs. And the view inside the White House, frankly, is a reflection of the president's view on this. They believe that this was a successful effort, that he promised to get out and he got out. And maybe it looked a little bit messy, but he got out and it would have been messy for everyone. That is President Biden's view, report or no report. And the defiance in that answer, that is truly what he feels about the situation, regardless of what is being said and what has been reported by the U.S. Army itself.
By the Army itself, exactly. Yeah.